Hi everyone, this is Dee and welcome to this handmade life. Today I'm going to show you how I created this watercolor painting of a spring robin, so let's get started. I'm going to start by sketching out the bird and branch. I'm not going into too much detail here, it's really just an outline, kind of giving me a sense of the shape of the bird and its position on the page. Next, I'm going to grab my number 6 round Princeton Heritage brush and start pulling some colors from my palette. I'm grabbing cobalt blue hue, burnt umber, and sap green, all by Daler-Rowney. Now I'm going to start painting the branch, beginning with the highlights first. So I'm using a really light wash of the sap green. I'm going in with a thicker consistency of the sap green, and I'm going to start filling in some of the shadows and details, pulling in that cobalt blue and burnt umber. My reference photo looks like the branch is kind of covered in moss, so I'm using kind of a slight horizontal stroke and dabbing movement to get those darker portions of the branch. Grabbing just a little more cobalt blue, mixing it with the sap green and burnt umber mixture, and adding some more dark areas to the branch. In preparation for painting the body of the bird, I'm grabbing some light red as well as some Purple Lake by Daniel Smith. Adding in a little more burnt umber here and mixing it with the mossy green mixture that I had previously created for the branch is going to give me a nice earthy gray color, and I'll use that later for the bird. Switching now to my size 8 round Princeton Neptune brush, I'm going in and just doing a water wash fill all over the background. I want the background to be wet when I start filling it in. I'm thinking of creating less of a detailed background and something a little more dreamy. Picking up that burnt umber and purple lake mixture, I'm starting to dab the wet background and create just some kind of soft bleeds between a mix between the burnt umber and purple lake, and then some areas where it's more concentrated with purple lake or more concentrated with just burnt umber, and then a bit of sap green and also that mossy gray mixture that I created previously for the hint of branches, and it's going to give me that kind of soft, out of focus look. Turning my attention back to the bird, I'm grabbing a little bit of yellow ochre, some burnt sienna, some vermilion hue, and just kind of playing with these in a mix. I'm now going to start painting the darker areas of the bird where it looks kind of gray. I'm using a mix of yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and the cobalt blue hue. In the darkest areas, I'm using a thicker consistency, and then in the lighter areas where the bird's body is almost white, I'm using a very light, thin consistency of this gray color. Part of the robin's body is a quite rich, warm brown, so I'm pulling in that burnt sienna mix and it's just starting with a really light wash to begin and building up that color. While the bird is still wet, I'm going to add a thicker consistency of this reddish brown color, particularly in the neck area where I see more darkness and color concentration. I really want the colors to bleed together, and doing this while the bird is still wet will allow the paint to do the work for me. For the bird's legs, I'm going to use mostly some burnt umber and a little bit of yellow ochre. Some of the brown areas of the bird are a little more blue in tone, so I'm just adding in to that brown mixture a little more of the cobalt blue hue. Mixing in quite a bit more cobalt blue hue here as I move on to the bird's beak, the area around the beak, and the eye. I'm finding here that the size 6 Heritage brush that I was using isn't quite allowing me to get the kind of detail that I want in the eye area, so I'm switching to the size 2 Princeton Velvet Touch. The bristles on this are not only smaller but stiffer, which will allow me to get those details more crisp and sharp. I'm also going to use it and some of that cooler toned brown to create some feathery details on the body of the bird. Going back to my size 6 Heritage, I want to create some darker, cooler toned shadow areas on the branch, so I'm picking up some burnt umber and cobalt blue hue, and again using those same strokes that are horizontal, sharp, and just kind of dabbing the branch. To add in some white highlights, I'm going to use a number 10 Jelly Roll pen then I'm just dabbing that as a highlight on the eye, a little bit on the legs, and as well as a few strokes for some shining feathers on the body of the bird. Taking one last survey of my reference image, I'm noticing that there's some more yellow tones at the top of the branch, so I'm going in with just a little bit of cadmium yellow hue. And that is the finished painting. I'm pulling off my masking tape here. This is always the exciting reveal. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching.